Okay, that takes you to your public hearing item tonight. This is item number 11, resolution number 11401, a resolution adopting the fiscal year 25-26 operating and capital budgets for the City of Folsom, the successor agency, the Folsom Public Financing Authority, and the Folsom Ranch Public Financing Authority.
Great. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Finance Director Stacy Tamani and I will be working together on this presentation. I'll start us off. But before I do that, I just want to thank the entire City of Folsom team from top to bottom that has compiled information to help develop the budget. And I do want to highlight Stacy, Adam, and their whole team who have helped kind of reformat the budget. And I know it was a lot of manual entry to get to this point. And our hope is that it is a format that we can automate more easily going forward. But this was a big push, and it's something that I don't take lightly. So thank you very much. So just to kind of describe where we are today, we're having our first kind of public hearing related to the budget. Our hope is that we present the information, we receive comments from the public, and that we receive questions from the council. But our hope is that we continue the public hearing, mainly because we just published on our website we had the version of the budget that was presented on May 27th. And so as we went through that, in particular, we wanted to revise the summary pages so that it includes the cash balances, excluding the assets, because we wanted to make it a document where the residents and the council could see how much money is actually available for us to make a decision. And when it includes the assets, that's not as clear. So that's kind of what we're hoping. So as far as the budget process, we have this hearing, and then on June 24th, we come back, we hold a budget public hearing again, we receive public input, and then our hope is at that time, the council adopts the preliminary budget. And then in July, September, we will come back to the council with what I kind of refer to as our final review of the final budget, because now we have the closeout of the 24-25 year, and we're looking at the 25-26 year. And so we can see, we thought we were starting at this point. Did we really start at that point? And if we need to make adjustments, we can do that. And then, so the other thing is in September and October, we'll have that final budget review, but we'll also be looking at the actual ending fund balances, and then to see if almost the development of the 26-27 budget, if what type of budget reductions we'll need to make. Because as you'll see in this budget presentation, we're projecting a $3.5 million operating deficit. And then in February or March, the city will conduct a mid-year budget review. Why that's important is it allows us another opportunity to make changes if needed when we look at our revenues that have come in. Are we hitting our targets? Are we exceeding our targets? Are we coming in lower? So by that point, any adjustments needed for the current year will be approved by the City Council, and then staff will be seeking direction from the council as to what cuts they would consider including in the fiscal year 2026, 2027. And why that's important is the way our services are provided, specifically on the Parks and Recreation side. There's a lot of lead up to that, hiring of part-time staff, for the different programs. And so if there are some reductions that are going to be included in that, we need to do it before it's actually started and before it's all put in place. So even if there was the desire in this upcoming year to do it, we have our summer programs all in full swing. We wouldn't necessarily realize the savings that one would hope at that time. So going to the next slide with budget development options. Sorry, I skipped ahead. So I think it's one more. So as we look forward, I mean, here's something, Stacey's going to go into all the details, but as I've kind of looked at summarizing, what are our options? Well, one, we develop a budget where our expenditures are below our revenue, so we live within our means. The other is we find another revenue source, or we keep things as they are in a deficit position, and the outcome that way is not good. So basically, I would say, option 3 is not an option, right? And so we're with the other two. And so if we could go to the next slide, this is kind of important to me. Not less than a year ago, the residents, kind of communicated a message that, hey, let's see what you can do with the money you have. And so that's kind of in line with our budget process that we've set up for this year and the next year, is one, trying to hold the line for this year as we navigate and make the proper review in many ways a transparent public process of what those cuts could look like for the 26-27 year, and hopefully, get the public input that we need so that we can right-size ourselves going forward. And at that point, the community can decide, hey, are we okay with those cuts? Or maybe should we review that option too of looking at another revenue source? Next slide. Just some background of, because sometimes with our budget, unintentionally, we send mixed messages. And most of our conversation that we have on a day-to-day basis about the general fund, because those are the services that we see and touch: police, fire, parks, our parks programs, our aquatic center. That's all funded by the general fund. But the city is actually a municipal corporation that provides police, fire, public works, planning, parks, recreation, utilities such as water, wastewater, and solid waste disposal. And so I look at this because I think it's important for us to note that we have subsidiaries within our organization. We brought this up at the May 27th meeting. So you have the city of Folsom, which would be Yum in this scenario. And then we have Taco Bell would be, I was going to say sewer, but that's kind of inappropriate. So we'd have Taco Bell as, let's say, water, Pizza Hut as Parks and Rec or general fund, and then solid waste would be Kentucky Fried Chicken. So all those things come into play in that we can only use funds for distinct purposes. And so, especially when you see the city with the development activity, it kind of creates this dichotomy of how can we struggle to maintain certain things, but yet we're building new parks or new facilities. And the reason for that is they're in these different silos. And so if we go to the next slide, this is kind of a breakdown without the logos, but if we go to the next one, the budget structure is one that we have over 150 funds. And so in the budget document we have now, on the first 4 pages, you should be able to see all 150 or so funds. So if we go to the next slide, this is kind of the layout. You'll see the general fund at the top, and that's really the only funds that the city council have that are discretionary. You can do pretty much whatever you want. Obviously, public safety is and has been the top priority, as it should be. But then you go into the variety of funds that include the lighting and landscape districts and CFDs. If you go to the next slide, the general fund summary pages 5 and 6 kind of drill down onto the general fund. So this shows kind of a historical accounting of the general fund revenues on a larger level of taxes, license, permits. And then on the expenditure side, it shows the different departments and what those expenditures are. If we go, and then at the bottom of that, you can see when you factor in the expenditures, revenues, transfers in, transfers out, you can see if what the net cost is to the city. Next slide, please. So with that, I'll turn the time over to Ms. Damani. Thank you.
Good evening, Stacy.
Good evening. Thank you, Brian, and good evening to all of the council members. I'm Stacy Tamani, Chief Financial Officer. Tonight, I'm happy to present some additional details on this proposed fiscal year 25-26 budget. As the city manager has already mentioned, this year's budget is being presented in a completely new format for us, so it's pretty significantly different from our previous budget book. And I just want to emphasize the work that went into it. We have a very small budget team, just myself and Adam Devlin, so I wanted to be sure to take this opportunity to thank him for all of his hours that he put into creating this book for you tonight. And I'd also like to thank the council for their patience. There was a lot of time, a lot of manual effort required to complete this, and so there may be some minor clerical errors in the document, but we've done our best to make sure that it's as accurate as possible for you tonight. And finally, please note that some changes have been made since that first version that you got. It's in front of you tonight, and it has been posted on the city's website. So with that, we'll dive into the slides here. We began this budget preparation similar to years past, We start on the revenue side, and that's the top line that you have on the slide here, projecting the increase to the total general fund revenue. And so we are estimating revenues to increase over last year's budgeted figures by about $4.7 million as you go across on that top line. So increase to projected revenue, $4.7 million. About half of that increase is associated with property tax growth, primarily from development in the Folsom Plan area. And then the other general fund revenues combined account for the additional $2 million increase over the prior year. So when we add the first and the third columns, in total, it's about $120 million, or about a 4% overall increase in revenues. For expenses, we'll go down to that second line. We start with the $117 million original budget that the City Council approved last year in fiscal year 24-25, and then we remove the one-time items that the City Council approved, because those won't be continuing. As we move forward, and that was about $2 million, and it was mostly for capital expenses. To determine the total proposed expenditure budget, we're working towards the $120 million that we have in available revenues. So as we move across here, we had to add in $5.5 million right off the bat for increases in salary, benefit, and insurance costs. So these are increases in labor costs approved in MOU agreements, regular annual salary step increases, benefit cost increases, and insurance costs. That adds $5.5 million to the budget. And when you add up the three lines, $117 million, you subtract the $2 million of one-time costs, plus the 5.5, you're at $120.5 million in expenditures. We just saw on the line above that we have $120 million in revenues. So just by adding that in, that left the city manager with a $500,000 shortfall, even before addressing any of the department requests this year, and we had $18.5 million of requests. We know that recent budgets have not been covering the true cost of providing all the services that the city provides, and that's why we see throughout the year that some departments and some line items go over their budget. Although the past two budgets have included significant increases to the operating accounts to try to keep up with the growing costs, we've still been behind. And so this year, the city manager is proposing to again increase those department budgets by an additional $3 million. And so you see that in the next column, true ups to operating accounts at the $2.975 million. And that's to fully account for those cost increases, no additional services. So when we go across that line and add up all of the columns now for expenses, it's total expenditures of $103.5 million, which you see in the final column. We have $120 million in revenue. So that creates a total deficit of $3.5 million that will have to come from your unassigned fund balance, otherwise known as the emergency reserve. And this will be the first time in at least 20 years that the budget proposes to use the emergency reserve outside of a recession for ongoing operating expenses. So now we'll go into the details a little bit and just look at what makes up these two items primarily. So the first is the increase in the personnel costs and insurance. We're seeing a $2.5 million increase to salary and your non-PERS benefits. Again, this is increases related to the MOU agreements, your regular annual salary step increases, and benefit costs that are not related to CalPERS. $2.4 million increase to CalPERS. This is for our current payments for our current employees, and then also the city's required contribution to the unfunded accrued liability. And then we have about a $645,000 increase to liability, property, and other insurance combined. So that gets you the total increase of $5.5 million that just had to be added into the budget right off the top. Then you have additional operations and maintenance line items that needed to be increased to cover the services that we're already providing. This is what we call the true-ups. You have a list of those true-ups that was provided as an additional item in the packet. As we go through the departments, general government had a true-up of $22,000. That's all of your administrative functions. Community development of about $45,000. Facilities of $153,000. The fire department of $732,000. Library at $19,000, Parks and Recreation at $1.6 million, and the police department at $427,000, for total true-up requests of $3 million. So this is a summary of the results of this proposed budget as far as what the budget committee saw. So we received $18.5 million in requests for this budget year, including 29 new positions. And only because we're using the emergency reserve, we were able to approve $2.9 million of expenses, but 0 general fund positions are being recommended. So all of the expenses that we've gone over so far now are included in this slide, and you see that in the fiscal year 25-26 proposed budget column. ending with that total of $123.5 million. That does include the $3.5 million use of the emergency reserves. So that's just blended in there into all of those lines. And I'll go through each category here. So starting with the top line, salary and benefit expense will increase by $4.8 million compared to fiscal year 25. This is a combination of the elements that we already discussed, including CalPERS. So it's a total of a 6% increase. The operations and maintenance budget is proposed to increase by about $3.8 million, or up 13%. This increase is related to those true-ups that were listed on the earlier slide, along with increased insurance costs. The next item here for capital outlay, this is a change this year. This budget proposes moving capital costs out of the general fund and accounting for them separately in separate capital funds. So that line item is going down, but you'll see that on the bottom, transfers out are going up, and it's going to move to other funds. And I'll go into a little more detail on those in a next slide. The debt service is pretty much in line with prior year, and then we have the transfers out, which I just mentioned, going up this year to account for those capital costs. So total expenses at the $123.5 million, a $6.4 million increase, or about a 5% change. This slide displays the general fund proposed appropriations sorted by your departments. So year over year, you have that $6.4 million increase for that same total of $123.5 million here. The fire department at the top is up about $1 million over the prior budget. There's two parts to this. They're up for the increases in the operating cost true-ups that we showed, and also salary, benefit, and insurance cost increases. But then they're down because we took their capital budget out of their department, and it's moving to transfers out. So it's a little bit skewed year over year. But as we move forward, the capital costs won't be in there, and you'll be able to see the true change just for true-ups or salary and benefit increases. Same situation for police. They're up $2 million here year over year, but they also had a vehicle budget that was included in capital, and that's been moved down to transfers out as well. But they had the salary and benefit insurance costs and also their true-ups to their operations. Community development has a slight decrease here. This is related to some one-time expenses, mostly grants that were included in their budget in the prior year. So those have been removed, but then offset by increased salary, benefit, and insurance costs. Public Works is up by about $188,000. Salary, benefit, and insurance costs, they didn't have any true-ups to their operating accounts this year. For general government, all of your administrative departments, it's up for those true-ups and then regular salary, benefit, and insurance cost increases. Parks and Recreation Department up about $950,000 from the prior year. This is about $1.6 million in true-ups, salary, benefit, and insurance increases, and then that's offset by one-time approvals that the City Council approved last year for Kids Play Park and also the community center upgrades. So those came out of their department and are not included anywhere else again for this year. The library is up about $84,000 for true-ups and their salary and benefit insurance increases. That's offset by about $80,000 in one-time approvals that they had last year. Down to facilities, they're up $258,000 for true-ups, salary and benefit and insurance increases, and then your non-departmental, which is everything that doesn't fit into a specific department, is pretty much even with last year. And some items that are in there is your $1.1 million contingency, $3.9 million for retiree health costs, the general fund's share of the transfer into the retiree health trust fund, our tax sharing agreement with the Palladio, debt service, payment to the county for a property tax administration. Items like that are what are included in your non-departmental. And then transfers out, we already discussed a little bit. So we started this idea of having capital funds transferred out and held in separate funds last year when the City Council approved to have $50,000 moved to an IT capital fund. So this is just continuing with that idea, but doing it for all of the departments. So we will now have a fleet capital fund with $125,000 going there, $200,000 to the IT capital fund, $756,000 this year being transferred out for fire equipment, and then $521,000 going to the new police equipment and capital fund. So none of these were increases to their budget. These amounts were already in the budget last year. It's just moving it down to transfers out, going into another fund so we can account for them separately. And it helps too, if they don't spend it in the year for some reason, it's easier for us to track it in the next year because it'll just stay in that fund. So this slide shows the capital expenditures that are approved or recommended to be spent this year. For the new capital fleet fund, $125,000 for non-safety vehicles, $150,000 in the capital IT fund for replacing IT system equipment, $756,000 for 11 ECG monitors for the fire department, and $521,000 for new vehicles in the police department. This slide is also showing some recommendations that the city manager is making to spend out of our capital facilities fund, Fund 602. That is the fund that if we have extra fund balance at the end of the year over 20%, gets transferred into that fund. So that's a capital fund that the city council does have discretion over the expenditures. So this budget here proposes $3.6 million. $1.3 million for roof replacement for the library, $1.8 million for an HVAC replacement for the library, $300,000 for the small vehicle roof repair building for fleet, and then $240,000 for slope roof replacement for City Hall. It's a portion of the roof that wasn't included in the project that we just did recently. So it's $3.6 million coming out of Fund 602. And the cash balance in that fund right now that's available for general fund expenses is $5.9 million. So with those expenditures, it will leave you with about $2.3 million remaining in the fund. And just recall that this fund does not have a source of revenue. The current balance is just what the city's been able to set aside over the 10 years. So these projects here will use up about 60% of that fund this year. And here you have the pie chart detailing this appropriation by department for fiscal year 25-26. Fiscal year 26 looks very much the same as last year. The only change is in the fire department, and this is because of their capital line item coming out of their department budget and moving to transfers. So you'll see that fire went down from 26 to 25, but transfers out went from 0 up to 1%. For the most part, everyone else, or not for the most part, everyone else does have the same percentages there. So we show this to show that this proposed budget continues to maintain that balance of expenditures by function. And then here you have your chart of authorized positions. This budget does not propose any new general fund positions, but you do see an increase from fiscal year 25's original approved budget to fiscal year 25-26. Because the city council in this current year already approved a park planner and arborist position that will be funded with funding sources outside of the general fund, but they are included in general fund departments, so they're listed there. We do have one position proposed in water and wastewater, and then 7 positions in solid waste for a total increase year over year of 10 positions. So now we'll take a look at the revenues. This slide is the 24-25 revenue budget, and then the proposed figures for 25-26. We're projecting total revenues, including those transfers in from other funds, to be at $120 million, which we have already gone over. Property taxes are expected to continue on that current trend line and increase over the prior year by about $3.3 million. Sales tax is estimated at $28 million for next year. We're bringing it down from last year's budget because we're not going to hit that $29 million mark. We'll likely be far below it this year, hoping to get to the $28 million for next year. Transient occupancy tax from our hotels is projected at $25.5 million for 25-26, so just a little bit of growth over the prior year. Licenses and permits is proposed at $4 million, pretty much in line with this year's budget. Intergovernmental, which is primarily our vehicle license fees, is we're expecting a slight increase there from about $11 million to $11.3. Charges for services is one that had a fairly large increase, proposed at just under $17 million. There's a lot of fees in this category. The biggest one is a projection for an increase in ambulance revenue in the fire department. We have increases in community development revenue with some of their fee increases. We have increased cost recovery reimbursement for public works projects. So that comes in from other funds. And then we have a right sizing of the budget for parks and recreation program revenues. So all coming in to have that increase there from about $14 million to $17 million. And I just wanted to note for Parks and Recreation, they've outperformed their budgeted amounts, which we've seen in the quarterly updates on the revenue side for the past 2 fiscal years. So we've trued those revenues up here in this charges for services category, but we also trued up the expenditures in their budget. So there isn't going to be room for them to go over their expenditures because there'll be extra revenue. There won't be. It has a trued up number now. So we're expecting that we will stay within those budgets, both on the revenue side and the expenditure side. So this chart shows the trends for our major tax revenues. Property taxes in blue, moving upward at a consistent pace and picking up a bit for those last 4 years as more properties in the Folsom Plan area are now paying property tax. We have sales taxes in red, showing that slower growth trend that I've been reporting for many years now. As we move forward into fiscal year 26 and beyond, we expect that trend to continue for sales tax. And this slide here reflects the property tax growth broken down by area. North of 50 is in the blue, and then the Folsom Plan area in red. And you can see the past 8 years that property tax from the Folsom Plan area has gone from being about 2% of total property tax back in fiscal year 18 up to about 24% of total property tax projected for fiscal year 25-26. This chart here reflects the city's unassigned fund balance by year in the dark blue columns, and then the unassigned fund balance as a percentage of expenditures displayed by that red line. And we're really focused here on these last 3 years where we're seeing the fund balance decreasing. And the far right bar is representing fiscal year 25-26, our proposed budget, with the proposed use of $3.5 million of the unassigned fund balance in this budget. We're projecting that by the end of the fiscal year, the unassigned fund balance will be at $18.7 million, or down to 15% of expenditures. So that falls below the council's policy of maintaining a range of 17 to 20% of expenditures in your emergency reserve. So now we'll briefly go through the enterprise fund budgets. We'll go through the revenues and proposed appropriations for water, wastewater, and the solid waste funds. The proposed budget for the Water Enterprise Fund includes about $19.1 million of program revenues. The proposed appropriation for operating expenses is at $18.4 million, and about $1.7 million of new capital expenses. So that would leave the fund with projected working capital or a cash balance of about $30 million. For wastewater, we have $12.2 million of program revenues, proposed appropriations at $7.5 million for operations, and $1.5 million for capital expenses, leaving them with projected working capital of $23 million. And then for solid waste, includes $27.9 million of program revenues, proposed appropriations of $22.8 million for operations, and $4.6 million for capital expenses for vehicle replacements in that fund. And it leaves them with working projected capital of $24 million. So next up is a look at the proposed capital improvement budget for fiscal year 25-26. The budget book that you have before you doesn't have a format for including descriptions or other information on the capital projects right in the book, but the current approved budget requests are included in each of the funds that will be funding those projects. And so I'll go through a list of some of the major projects that have current budget requests this year. This isn't everything that's in the plan, but it captures most of the major projects. And the list is just in total project budget order with the largest project at the top. So you have the budget prior to fiscal year 2026. So some of these are ongoing projects. And then you have the current budget request for fiscal year 26, and then the total budget that we are proposing here for each project. So Empire Ranch Road Interchange, requesting an additional $500,000, a couple of water system rehab projects, storm drain ponds, water system rehabilitation project number 4, Livermore Community Park, asking for an additional $400,000, National Pollution Discharge Elimination System at $700,000, and then a new project for Oak Avenue Lift Station and Force Main project at $768,000. And the funding for these projects is primarily impact fees, enterprise funds, or grants, or special revenues. And this chart here shows the funding source for all of the proposed projects for a total of $10.7 million. And you'll see that the special revenue funds, capital projects, and enterprise funds are the funding sources for this. But this chart here kind of acts as a map for you to be able to see it in the budget book. So if you were to look, for example, at Fund 412, Park Improvements, you would see in their capital outlay line item $446,000 of proposed expenditures. So here you have your proposed appropriations by fund in total for all city funds. This is what the city council is required to approve, is the appropriation by fund type. This includes the operating budget and the capital costs. The proposed budget includes the transfers out and then the expenditures that are non-transfers out for the total in the column on the right. So for the general fund, it's $123.5 million. For enterprise funds, $57.7 million. Special revenue funds at $14.7 million. Your debt service funds at $16.8. Capital projects at $11.2, internal service funds at $25 million, and fiduciary funds at $25 million, for a total citywide budget of $274 million. So in this final section of my budget presentation is the 5-year budget forecast. We've broken this down into 3 major budgetary concerns that the city is facing as we move forward into the next 5 years. First up is the 5-year forecast for general fund revenues and expenditures overall. This chart has the general fund's projected total revenues in blue on the left sides and then projected expenditures in red for fiscal year 26-27 through fiscal year 30-31. And for the past few years, we've been presenting projections looking ahead to when the city's operating expenses would begin to exceed revenues. With revenues growing at about 4% and expenditures at 5%, we projected that expenditures would exceed revenues right at this point. With a $3.5 million shortfall estimated in this proposed budget, we're on track for these shortfalls to continue. And it has an estimated $6 million annual shortfall projected by fiscal year 30-31. These are projections for expenditures without a cut in services and without a recession. So this is what it would cost the city to continue to provide all the services that we're currently funding in this budget. It's a $24 million shortfall over the next 5 years combined if no cuts are made. So what does that mean for fund balance? Well, if no cuts are made and there's no new revenue source coming into the city, this is the projected effect on your unassigned fund balance as you use the reserve to cover annual shortfalls. The blue bar on the far left shows your current level of fund balance as proposed in this budget. It's projected to be at 15% as a percentage of expenditures, so already below the council's minimum policy by the end of fiscal year 25-26. Then based on projected revenue and expenditure growth, the balance starts to drop down to 12%, then 8%, then we're down to 4%, which is about $5.7 million by fiscal year 28-29, and then pretty much completely depleted by fiscal year 29-30. And if this continued into fiscal year 30-31, you'd have a $6 million shortfall with no funding source. This does not take into account using the fund balance for any new recurring expenses that might be added. That would deplete the fund balance even faster, and it does not project a recession, which would also have an additional negative impact. The third major budgetary concern is the required CalPERS contributions. This slide here shows the projected future CalPERS contributions, and it comes from the CalPERS Pension Outlook tool that they provide to employers online. CalPERS puts in their current assumptions and then provides a forecast of the required contributions. So I've listed them here up through 3031. And the main takeaway from this slide is that total contributions for our miscellaneous plan is projected to increase from $12.9 million, which we're at for 25-26, up to $15.3 million. And for safety, from $14.6 million to $16.8 million. So total increase for both plans combined of about $4.6 million over the next 6 years, with most of that coming from the general fund. And it's also important to note that in this projection, CalPERS assumes payroll growth of only 2.8% per year. So if increases go over that 2.8%, then it will increase our required contributions as well. So in summary, I've used this slide for the past few years, and at one point we were able to check 3 of the 4 boxes. Now we're down to 1 of the boxes this go round. So first, the council's typically directed that we maintain the historical balance of expenditures by department. That's your pie chart, and this budget does do that, so we can check that first box. But second, as we go over to the right, unfortunately, this budget is not balanced. Our policy requires the presentation of a balanced budget where expenditures do not exceed revenues for ongoing operations. They do exceed revenues for ongoing operations in this proposal, so that requirement is not checked. Third, the City Council has a policy of maintaining a reserve equal to 17 to 20% of expenditures. This budget proposes to use a portion of the fund balance for ongoing operations, and so in doing that, it reduces the reserve below the Council's policy to an estimated 15% of expenditures by the end of the year. So we can't check that box off of having reserves within the City Council's approved range. And then lastly, and this is the box that's been unchecked for many years, this budget does not cover all of the city's needs. It leaves millions of dollars in infrastructure, equipment repair and replacement, and staffing needs, and many other important items unfunded. So as far as the next step for budget approval, this was the second presentation of the proposed budget, the first public hearing and first opportunity to adopt. As a reminder, the budget must be adopted by the last working day of the fiscal year, June 30th. And if the City Council does not adopt the budget by June 30th, then the budget proposed by the City Manager is deemed adopted. And so with that, I will turn it back over to our City Manager for his closing slides.
Great. Thank you very much for that comprehensive presentation. I appreciated how it highlighted just the trends going forward and what we can look at. And so I think that's why it's important to note that, I don't think it's really hard to figure out that we can't continue to operate in this manner. So with the $3.49 million general fund budget and for this fiscal year, we're really going to have to give some thought to what we do going forward. So essentially, we're not necessarily just saying, hey, adopt this budget, council, with the $3.5 million deficit and then hope things get better. If this budget is adopted, it really is a kind of the starting point for additional work. And as I've thought about, our Natoma Station Lighting and Landscape District scenario, it is actually kind of a little microcosm of what we have to do on a bigger scale. So over the next several months, we'll have to have communication with the community at large so that they can get on board and understand what we're working with. Much like Natoma Station at first, like, hey, what the heck are you doing? Once we got into the numbers and showed what the outcomes are, I think it helps them understand exactly some of the things that we're going to have to look at. So over the next, actually, can we move to the next slide? Yeah, so we're going to, have to aggressively pursue, a strategy that reduces our costs so that we can live within our means. And so how we do that is through public outreach. How we do that is working with our departments of what does it look like in each department to reduce our service levels and kind of create a menu of options for the community to look at. And we can say, much like Natoma Station, ooh, do we really want to eliminate, our turf maintenance? Do we really want to do those things? And so a couple things will happen. The community will decide, yeah, we can live without those things, or they'll have to decide, maybe we want to look at another revenue stream. But that basically concludes our report. We're not asking for the council to adopt the budget at this point. We're actually hoping you don't, so that we can continue the public hearing and so that anyone who wants to can look at the budget document in its entirety. We welcome the questions. We want to answer those questions because we really want people to come up to speed and be familiar with where we're at. And because it's really hard to get a consensus if no one agrees with the starting point. And so I think at this point with this budget, I think we can all agree that this is where we start. And then where we end up will be a community-driven process. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Kozlowski, we'll start with you.
No questions. I just was doing a little trip down memory lane looking at our budget from 2009-10, which looks a lot like this one because it was a similar situation. And, the world is cyclical and things come up and they come down. I'm delighted by the work that has gone into this. Thank you very, very much. It's comprehensive and clear, crisply organized, and pretty easy to read relative to city budget documents. So thank you for that. I value our new city manager's expertise in this particular area, and I'm looking forward to this process making it so that when we are looking at that future FY 26-27 budget, we are not spending through our reserve at anywhere near the rate that we're anticipating here. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Rathel?
Yeah, I'll echo Councilmember Kozlowski's comments that I really do appreciate the work that's gone into this budget and also the detail and the trend data that we're able to see within the individual funds. And with that, I'll move on to my questions. Just on the, looking at the kind of capital projects that are in here, I know the transfers out are listed here as the 1.6 million. I can see all those going to capital projects. but I see these other cash balances that are there in the capital projects. Is there any way for me to differentiate between what's restricted and what's non-restricted within those capital projects?
Could you give me an example?
Like, we have a police capital that's 428, which has almost $2 million in it, but we're not using that in order to buy the vehicles. Instead, we are creating a new fund called 607, and we're buying vehicles. So I got to assume that 428 is restricted in some way to keep us from spending the money out of there instead of taking it out of the general fund.
Yeah, that's correct. And actually, in the next iteration of this, we're going to change the name of the capital funds, like the 601, 602 will be more like replacement fund. And so Stacy, related to the capital projects funds, the 400 level is basically developer impact fee funds that are collected for new items. It can't be for replacement items.
Got it. So anything with a 400 number, I can assume is a developer impact fee?
Exactly.
Perfect. That's what I needed to know. That was what I was not getting out of here. Any other special numbers that we should know in the hundreds, just so it kind of makes it easier to digest?
Probably. And so I think part of this process is to get it all out there so
Sure.
anyone can see the fund and we can ask those questions. And so I think what we'll do is make it clear to what is expendable for some of those deferred maintenance items and what is just tied to development. Like there was Livermore Park has an additional phase being added to it. That's from a developer impact fee, but north of 50, versus some of our south of 50 developer impact fees. So I think this process will be one where we can modify the titles of these and the labeling so it's even clearer, because I think this is a powerful tool in that are we leveraging all the dollars that we have quickly or more quickly, or are we pooling funds too quickly, and do we have to focus our energy on getting things designed and built differently?
And then can you address, just while we're on the police and fire equipment, we're clearly we're deficit spending, right? And so I think one of the things that maybe wasn't addressed is like, hey, if I'm not able to meet my mortgage payment and my utility bills, I don't go out and buy a new car or buy some new equipment. Even if I really need it, I don't have it in my budget. In this case, you guys are recommending that we go out and get some, I assume, replacement equipment for police and fire. This isn't new, like nice to have. This is like oh my goodness, we got to have this or else the wheels are going to fall off sort of equipment, and just kind of want to touch on those requests
Right.
for specific equipment.
And Stace or even Chief Cusano can talk about the big capital is the EKG. Is that what that is?
Correct.
Chief Cusano, would you mind talking a little bit about that? I mean, because this is a significant item that there's a useful life for that piece of equipment, and the chief will be able to talk about
Yeah,
that.
the real question is can we put it off a year? If we're deficit spending.
Mayor, excellent question, Vice Mayor Rathel. The answer to that one is putting that one off is no. We currently have, I believe it's 11 EKG monitors, and this is the equipment that when we're doing advanced life support that we hook up to your heart, we can read the rhythms and determine what kind of treatment we're going to provide. The ones that we have right now, they really have a 10-year life cycle. I believe they're either at 10 years or even 11 years. And the cost of trying to maintain them has outweighed their worth, and the current software that we're dealing with them, excuse me, is it's not supported anymore with the Zoll company. So they've kind of we've pushed them to the limit. These have been in the request in the budgets before this year, but now we're at kind of a critical stage, and we really have to have them to continue ALS services.
Thank you, Chief.
Sure.
And any more information we can get on the police? And I know Chief isn't here tonight. I can wait on that question, but I just kind of want the public to hear like why these are must-haves,
Yeah,
right?
I think that's a fair question. We'll have to get back
Okay.
on that.
The next question is I on the capital improvement plan, we've got $500,000 set aside for the Empire Ranch interchange. I know I've been beating that project, saying, hey, it's time to go on this. $500,000 doesn't get us anywhere on that project. Can we make it 8 million? What should it be? Because we're about to get CalPERS, or not CalPERS, sorry. Caltrans approval. So can we make that 8 million and actually design this interchange next year? Start designing it?
Well, I mean, I think we will be working on the design and we will use those funds. I think we didn't allocate all the funds. We only allocated the funds that we thought we'd be able to spend, because it'll be, even the design will take multiple years to get through. And so if we expend all of those funds, since there are funds available, we would definitely come back. We would not delay the project because, oh, that's all the money we would have. We would come back with a budget amendment to the council and say, hey, good news, we were able to accelerate the design process and we need additional funding. I think we have a prudent amount in there, knowing how far we can go with the design. Mr. Ryan Chance of Public Works is here. I know he's working diligently with Caltrans to do that. And as we've talked, that's something that we're going to enhance our efforts and even possibly talk about. Is there some maybe even local or private consultants we can use to kind of expedite that process?
Thank you. And then on the, to me, what I see, and I know you've been talking about this for many years, is the sales tax is really what's hurting us more than anything. Without the growth south of 50, we would be in dire straits without that property tax, the 24% of it coming in. But even with all of that growth, our sales tax has flattened. So I'm just wanting maybe to touch a little bit on, was there any thought put into, how do we get that sales tax revenue back on the right trajectory? Is there any thought to an economic development impact strategy or a focus on sales tax? I know we can say shop local until we're blue in the face, but it doesn't seem to have made much of a difference. And I was just wondering, has there been any thought in how we can effectively spend some cash to maybe increase that sales tax revenue?
Sure. One of the things that I think is that we've looked at is looking at our areas that that aren't performing as much as they used to, because there's some areas of town where it used to be maybe a higher traffic retail area, and how do we kind of reinvest in those areas? The Central Business District Vision Plan, I think, provides some ideas related to that. And then when you look at the outlets and other things, how can we work with those corporate offices to invest maybe more in those outlets to make it more like the San Francisco premium outlets? Those are the type of things that we'll look at. But one of the things that just in my experience, it's really tough to overcome is people have become really, really accustomed to shopping differently today than they have in the past. With Amazon and others, and especially as people get busy, I try to buy everything I can local, but it's really hard to avoid, waking up in the morning, oh, I forgot, I need this. And if you order early enough, by the time you get home from work, it could be on your doorstep. So those are some of the things that we have to adapt to, that this is our new reality. And to kind of show some of the changes with property or sales taxes, our per capita sales tax is actually getting lower and lower and lower, because we're showing a flattening of sales tax, but we have an increase of population. I think year over year, last year, the population grew by 3,000 residents with the south of 50. So that just means on a per capita basis, we're spending less, and our sales tax revenue is suffering. So definitely more work to do. I appreciated the meetings I've had with Joe Gagliardi with Choose Folsom, and How do we, use more data to see what areas are maybe slipping a little bit so we can have, targeted meetings with them to see what it is. I appreciate Mayor Aquino's efforts to kind of reach out to our top sales tax providers. We had a really good meeting yesterday with Costco to kind of learn about what they're doing and giving us some tips of, hey, what can we do to help you increase your business? And I thought it was very, very productive, but definitely more work to be done.
All right, last one for you. You're the municipal financial expert. We've got a range of 17 to 20%, and you're recommending us to go to 15%, which I think used to be our reserve target, if I remember correctly. You're comfortable with us dropping to 15% with the idea we're making changes. Where would you like to see the reserve target at long term?
The reserve target, I think I would be more comfortable. You could keep a reserve target, between 8 and 10% if it was just the general fund reserve. If you had substantial capital funds or replacement funds, but since we don't have those, the general fund reserve has basically served as that emergency capital. And so ultimately, ideally, we would see, something in this range, but we've augmented our fleet, our facilities, our IT, our police equipment, our fire equipment, our parks. We actually have a parks replacement, have a trails replacement fund. And that's something that I really appreciated in Stacy's kind of 4-quadrant thing. Unfortunately, there's 4 boxes we want to check. We're only checking 1. And so the main reason for this budget is to give the community a chance to determine, what do you want to fight for? What does Folsom want to be when it grows up? Really, what do we want to be? Because we're at a critical juncture where pretty much every asset of any significance is at a point of we either make some changes to fund it and improve it, or we don't do anything to it and we lose it forever, right? For a trailway, if it gets to a certain point, I actually went on a little bike ride, and I think this is an HOA area, and part of it was paved. At first, I thought it was just a dirt trail, but then as I got further, it was paved. But then it went back to dirt, and then they actually put some bark on the trail. So my point is, in that particular case, you're never getting that trail back to the paved nature that it once was. And so we're at this critical juncture, and it's my goal to present all this information to the community. Anyone who will listen, I'll go to service clubs, business groups, to communicate what our actual need is, and then the community will have the decision. Do we want to invest in ourselves, or do we want to continue where we're going? My hope is that with the information and the proper communication, because if you just look at our neighboring cities, which are the ones that are thriving? If we look to their neighbor to the north, Roseville, I think a lot of people say, man, they got their act together. But I appreciate my colleague, Kelly, in Parks. She sent me a report from 2018, and their report in 2018 was basically kind of like the report that Stacy showed us today. And so what they ended up doing is they passed a sales tax measure. And so I understand why the residents were concerned and voted, not to approve that. But at the end of the day, if we want Folsom to become what it was, and even to become better than that, we're really going to have to look ourselves in the mirror and say, hey, are we really willing to invest in it? Because even when we come forward, I don't think we're going to like the cuts that we're going to have to propose. These are just facts. A fire station costs, on an annual basis, about $2.5 million to operate. Our operational budget deficit right now is $3.5 million. And so when you start cutting around the edges, it's going to be really hard to get to that $3.5 million, right? You're going to have to look at significant service program reductions. And public safety cannot be out of that. It's going to have to touch some of that, right? Even though it is our top priority, because whenever we look at cuts, you'll hear, and I've heard this in my various jurisdictions where I've worked, and I don't know if I'm a glutton for punishment, but this is the third city where we have to go through kind of these type of things. And what I found is it's much better to direct it head on, right? We've seen if we want to try to dance around it, it's really hard and difficult to get to a place. We will continuously be frustrated, where if we actually look at the hard decisions we have to make and come to a consensus and realize that, hey, we're all in this together, I think we can come up with a message of hope. much like Roseville did. In 2018, they followed a community-driven process. They asked the public what they wanted. They ended up with a sales tax measure, which has enabled them to enhance the things that were already good about it. Folsom has created a house that is very expensive. You don't add 30% open space area and not expect to pay a premium, right? When you look at everyone loves the goats are awesome, but they're really, really expensive, right? I mean, before we used to have the ability, and we'll look into this, is how can we use, some of our folks in the prisons to help with some of the labor. That will reduce the cost, but it's not 3.5 million. And we're committed to looking at every way possible to become more efficient, looking at volunteer programs, looking at all those things. But the things that we've identified that are hard to overcome is just the natural ecosystem that's been created, which is we have, retiree costs, PERS costs, retiree health costs. And that's not unique to the city of Folsom, right? There's 400 plus other cities in California that are suffering from some of the same challenges. So I look forward to this opportunity, and I look at with one for hope, because just the comments I've heard today from the folks in the Tacoma station, I think if we provide information, I mean, we have a smart, really astute population that's service-minded, that they want to come together and make this community great. And that's why I wanted to come here. It's a great place. And so how can we come together, coalesce, and come up with a solution that makes it better on the other side?
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Mayor. That's all my
All
questions.
right, thank you. Councilmember Rohrbach?
I don't have questions as much as comments, too. I just want to say I approve of your message, City Manager. I approve of everything that you just said and your outlook for the city, and the way you're building trust. Couple brief things based on what Justin, you just said. We talk about sales tax going down a lot, but I think to your point about economic development, there is one way to increase sales tax. That's to increase the base that we're taxing. So I appreciate the conversations I've had as well with Brian and my colleagues and the business owners in the city, how to revitalize and how to kind of improve that our processes so we can attract more businesses that fit within Folsom and increase that base. The second thing is, that was a great question and answer about the 400 items, like the number 400 means something. I think it would be great in the future, in the budget, in the finalized budget, to have an asterisk if there is consistencies like that, like all 400 is impact fees. So when the resident, someone who's not sitting here listening on the dais reads the budget, they see the asterisks or
Some kind
a
of
headline
key,
or something.
basically. Yeah.
What did you call it?
A key.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah.
I think that would be great consistently throughout, because one of the feedbacks, and I'll talk about this in a minute, is reading the budget in the past has been really difficult. So that would help. Stacy and you and I have had a lot of conversations at budget time, and I know that this has taken a lot of time to redo it and kind of present it in a different way. And as Brian said, manually enter things. I just want to say how much I appreciate all your work and effort. I am so happy. I'm not happy about the situation we're in, but I'm very happy about how we can read it, how we can access the information, how you presented the numbers. The numbers matched the previous numbers, and that's very comforting, and it builds trust. And then with explanation of why those things were different, if they were different at all. So I greatly appreciate that. It does build trust, and I think it builds trust within the community as well. So I just want to give you a special shout out that I appreciate that. It's, I have a small little question, but I'm going to wait and ask it tomorrow. Just kind of a number. So I appreciate using the actual expenses the last couple years to come up with the estimate of our expenses going forward. It's a much more reliable report, and unfortunately that means we had some it looked like we had some growing pains this year in the presentation, but just like with the Natoma station and our L&Ls, the more transparent that we can be of actually where we're at, the more understanding. It's not what we want or where we want to be, but having the community have that trust and understanding allows us to all go forward. And it's just kind of what I'm piling on what Brian already said. So I appreciate the transparency of this. Two future things, I really appreciate that we're presenting the problem that we have right now, but also we're going to be talking about potential solutions. So we're going to be able to, the staff is going to be able to bring things. If we do this, here's here's one of the solutions, and this is the consequence of that. And that's really where we should be: is what decisions do we make to take action. So I know Brian and I talked about this briefly a couple days ago, and we can be presented with a problem all day long, but if there are no presenting of any solutions, then, where do we go from there? So I'm super excited, not again about that we're in a deficit, but I'm excited that we're going to have to make some tough decisions, and it is going to come to us because that's why we were elected. And with your feedback, hopefully we make the right ones for our future. And then also council priorities, I felt very much supported, and it was allowed to articulate any concerns, ask questions, but also priorities that I have in the budget. It was a much different process, and I just really appreciate that. So the future, I love, Brian, that you're going to bring back September, October, that the council can get together and really kind of work through some of these tough decisions and really decide as a whole what are our priorities and what are our core competencies and what are we going to focus on. So I just really appreciate the future process as well. So that's all I have.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Leary.
Oh, I want to thank Stacy for answering the 20-something questions I sent to you after the meeting we had with Brian last week. This is my first time through a complicated budget process. I've sat in the audience and watched what happened before, and there's a lot to it. I think this has made it simpler. There's still a lot I need to learn, so I appreciate Councilmember Rathel's, questions and some of outlining some of his goals. When I was looking at this, the questions for me came up about how do we resolve some of these issues, such as some cities contract out their solid waste services, and I'm not sure if I think that comes out of an enterprise fund, but are there any savings in doing that with any kind of services that the city is currently employing people to perform? And I'm not asking, we have a list right now, but I think that's one of the things that we can look at down the line. It was actually surprising to see that the TOT tax has remained flat. And I think that's something, that we can work on. It was nice that we have a new hotel coming to town, but it won't be online for a little bit. And, some of the goals you talked about, like improving the look of the outlets and use of those. We have the outlets and the Palladio are actually good revenue producers. I see the new medical facilities coming in here is helping to increase the income for the city, hopefully, with new residents and people who will actually use our restaurants and buy things in town. But yeah, it's complex, and there isn't one solution. Solutions aren't simple, and again, hearkening back, well done to the Natoma Station thing, and that's asking our residents to invest in our community and however we can do that. And I would love to say that we can rely on entirely volunteer staff to do a lot of this work, but I think that we can do some, but I think it's unrealistic for certain tasks that take people who are trained and certified in doing these things. So it's a complicated problem, and I'm also looking forward to hearing back from you and Stacy about some of these funds that appeared to be unused for a number of years, and finding out if those funds, which I didn't add them all up, but it looks like if they could be used for purposes for which they maybe weren't first intended but aren't restricted, that would help go a long ways to resolving some of the issues and maybe being able to take less money out of the reserve funds. But again, thank you both so much for your work.
Thank you. I will also echo the thanks to Stacy and Adam. I know you guys are still reeling from the loss of Terry Hemley a couple of years ago, and now the retirement of John Donahue. So you're doing a lot of this work with less help. So we really, really appreciate this. I do just have a couple questions. On page 10, about halfway down, in general fund revenues, it talks about facility rentals. And when you look back to 2019-20, we go all the way from 3,925 to a high of 13,764 in 22-23. This year, it looks like or for next year, projecting 91,800. And I'm just wondering why we're projecting such a jump.
Let me see if I'm on the right page here. You said page 10, facility
Page
rentals?
10, yeah, about halfway
Okay.
down.
And you're saying the it's going up?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, like, it looks like we've averaged the last couple of years maybe $12,000, and now we're projecting 91,800.
I'll have to get back to you on that. The department's helped with the revenue projections, so I will check with them and see
Okay.
if there was something different specifically for
thank
that.
I mean, this is a great question, and this is what we want is because the revenue projections actually are very critical to our success. Because if we build revenue projections, our departments can actually, and I've seen the scenario where our departments do an excellent job of living within their means on the expenditure side, but because we overestimated the revenues, we actually still lose, right? I mean, and so.
Actually, I do know what this is.
Okay.
This is the new rental agreement that we have under the parking garage. So once they start paying for their lease, it will
Got
go into
it.
that line item.
Okay,
Okay,
good.
that makes sense. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. And then, let's see. So just to make sure kind of we're all using the same terminology. So when you talk about true ups, essentially, you're not proposing any new ongoing general fund expenditures for next year. You're just basically budgeting what we have been spending, and that accounts for that additional $3 million. Yeah.
That's correct.
Which is, look, let's be honest about what we're doing, and that's, we got to do that in order to improve, right? But are you considering if we wanted to pursue some cuts for this next year now instead of waiting a year, I know just some things that, are certainly will not make a dent in the budget, but some of the things that we've been talking about are eliminating the attendant at the skate park. We've talked about single role in the fire department. Are we?
We will continue to explore all those. In fact, I don't know, Kelly, if you can talk a little bit about, I think the attendant at the skate park is already underway.
Okay.
Yeah, if Kelly, if you can give an update on that.
While she's coming down, we're still putting $500,000 aside next year for the Retiree Health Trust Fund?
Correct, that is included.
Okay.
So Mayor, City Council's Kelly Gonzalez, Parks and Recreation Director. So you will be seeing a staff report coming at the next City Council to recommend eliminating staffing. Which would be a reduction of approximately $40,000. Based on feedback from the community, we will be asking for an appropriation to change our lighting to automatic, so to convert it to Musco, so we don't have to have staff that turn it on and off, but we can program it. But that will be coming at the next City Council meeting.
Okay, thank you. Again, not the answer to our question, but.
Right, but the reality is, we're going to scour everything. As we look through this budget document and identify different funds, I've mentioned this in other things, we'll bring an item to the council. This is not going to save the operational budget, but if there's ways to look at, for example, we have the housing fund that has, $20 million in, and how can we reimburse the general fund, that's sold at a discount, the Persifer lots for Habitat for Humanity. So we'll have an item coming, I think we sold it for $15,000. We have an assessed value of $650,000. So that would be $635,000 that I would recommend we put into general fund capital, because we don't want to put, one-time revenues into an ongoing expense,
Right.
but that will help in a variety of ways. And we're hoping to find all those. It's not going to be, the magical cure to our situation, but every little bit helps.
Right, good. Okay, thank you. And just to kind of follow up on the questions and the comments from earlier, like I committed during my State of the City address, we're reaching out to the top 25 sales tax producers, because I think the most important thing is retain the businesses we have, right? And see how we can maybe help them increase their sales and their revenue, which in turn helps the city. So we did have a really good meeting yesterday with Costco. We got one with Walmart set up, and then I'm reaching out to you all so that you can meet with the top 25 sales tax producers in your districts, just to make sure that, we let them, first of all, know that we're happy to have them here in Folsom and thank them for doing business, but because they are really important to the health of the city. So anyway, I don't believe we have any requests to speak on this item. We have one? Okay. Like to call that person?
Madam Mayor, if I may
Yes.
request. This
Oh,
is
yes,
a
I will open the
hearing.
public hearing. Thank you,
ma'am.
Mr. City Attorney. I will open the public hearing.
Okay, well, request from Sharon Kindle to speak.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
so we have no request to
no
speak.
request to
And
speak.
I will close the public hearing. But we are, do you need a motion or whatever to continue this item to the next meeting, or do we?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So assuming everybody's in agreement that we're going to let this go one more time so that the public has an opportunity, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll
to
make a
continue.
motion to continue this item.
Second.
Second.
Perfect. We have a motion and multiple seconds. Please call the
Council
roll.
members Raythel?
Yes.
Rohrbaugh?
Yes.
Kozlowski?
Yes.
Leary?
Yes.
And Aquino.
Yes, thank